Welcome back to Newcastle Central. I got a few little bits of Scenic details that came in the mail a couple of days ago. So I talked about this after the last videos where I'd been wrapping up the station platform builds, thinking a little bit about how I'm going to go ahead and do the platform walls and the canopy. So in the meantime, I'm starting to look at a little bit of Scenic work in and around outside the station itself. So I got some of the Wills kits, conky trunking. I got some Peco AWS ramps, SL-45. This is what they would use for the automatic warning system on the train. So these would go about 150-200 feet or so out of away from where signaling would be. So I'm probably going to put those on the north and south approaches into the station itself. Then got a bunch of the Peco dummy point motors, SL-47. These will sit alongside where the actual points themselves are. So I have about 5, I think, of the surface mount PL11 Peco electric points, but all the other ones are SEEPs PM1. So little dummy point motors that will sit alongside, add a little bit of interest. Also got some of the Peco buffer stops, SL40. I'm going to try these out. They were only about £1.30 a piece, I think, something like that. Comes with a little kit, and so I'll put that together, paint it up, do a little bit of weathering. They're going to go in on platforms 0 and 1 back here, and then on platforms 9, 10, 11, and 12 back here. I haven't done anything on what will be the fret siding here. Honestly, I forgot to order one. I only ordered 6 rather than 7, but I'm also a little unsure as to what I'm going to do down here, so I thought I would leave that. I might end up putting in LED light as well. We'll see. But for now, I thought at least I'd put something in there so it's not just, bare platforms at the end there. And I also got some of the Bachmann Branchline Lineside cabinets. They're somewhat finished. I don't know. I'll wait until we actually get them out of the packet. It's got things like the hazard warning symbol on them. I don't know. They look a little rough to me for something that will be finished, but it'll be a little bit of a shame to overspray those. So we'll check those out as I go along. But that's kind of some of what I'm going to be working through in this video. I went ahead and laid out a whole bunch of the Lineside detailing pieces that I had gotten. Everything's just kind of very loosely put together. So if we come in close, this is an idea of what it's going to be like. That's the Wills trunking kit and the Peco point motors, and then Bachmann Branchline Lineside relay boxes. Point motors seem a little on the large side. They're just kind of loosely put in place and then tacked on there. Obviously none of this is painted and glued down yet. Point motors do seem a little on the large side. These are meant to be 00 and HO gauge. Yeah, they seem a little bit big. I know prototypically they are fairly large. And if we come over and look, like when you compare them to what would, those relay boxes in the back there, they must be fairly sizable. I mean, we've got to be looking at getting up with something like 5.5, 6 feet long. I haven't actually measured them out, but they seem pretty large. But again, I'm assuming that was Peco. They're fairly prototypical. So the idea here is we would have 3 different sections essentially of electrical work and trunking. This is on kind of the approach into the south side of the station. So going with 3 relay boxes here into the trunking that will come down here. We'll have some of the orange cabling that comes right around there, and then another into some of the short trunking for then those 2 point motors. The reason why I kind of went for a little bit more relay boxes here is there'll actually be a gantry, a signaling gantry that will go across the top of all 3 rails here, and that'll have some of the signaling lights as well. So there'll be a little bit more power that will come there. We then got another one as we're coming into where the lines then start to split out. So just the one relay box here that'll be controlling, or would be controlling 3 point motors. Moving a little bit further up, another couple of relay boxes for what would be 3 more point motors, and that's where you see the first of those surface mount point motors. I think it works out okay running the trunking up to it like that. Logic here is that there's actually another point motor you can see hiding out just on the other side of the class 43. And these might also be controlling some of the platform signal lights that will be on here. end of the platforms, I've also dropped in a couple of relay boxes. One that would probably be controlling this point motor, but there would also then be signal lights on there. And then we've got one more in here, because again, we would have some lights that are in here on the end of the platform for the trends. So that's loosely what I'm looking at. So it does add a little bit. I mean, one thing that it's kind of made me realize is that I really need to work on some kind of backboards. I need to kind of finish up doing the wall covering on that side as well. It's starting to highlight that it still kind of looks like a mess of a shed. I need to get some orange cabling, some orange wire as well, just so that I could run out here. But I'm quite happy with how these all look. There are some alternatives that I could have gone to the Wills kit. I think there's a couple of different options that I've seen. I think Scale Model Scenery has some. I don't know if it's 3D printed themselves. I've also seen some card options as well. I was a little unsure how the card would work when it comes to then doing ballasting. In the same way I'm a little concerned about doing the ballasting and the gluing on the platforms. I would be a little concerned about having just cardboard based trunking. I feel like that would soak up a whole bunch of moisture. So the Wills kit, quite happy with how they look. They're a little fiddly. You have to clean up the spruce because there's four each side. Try and move one of them apart. There we go. So that's the length of them. But on each side they're held on the sprue by 4 points. So you've got a total of 8 points to cut and then trim. So it's a little bit fiddly, try and get them cleaned up, but overall I think it's worthwhile. They weren't that expensive either. I feel like they're only £3, something like that, which I don't think is that expensive compared to the time it would take to individually cut dowels and whatever else. I have seen it done with matchsticks and lollipop sticks and things like that, but I quite like those ones. Like I say, I'm still a little undecided on the point motors size-wise. I don't know if there's a whole lot of different options. Maybe it's when they're painted and weathered, they'll look a little bit better. And the relay boxes are actually pretty nice as well. Like I say, I was a little unsure, not quite sure how well. Can zoom in and see it, try and get some focus. Not going to focus in. But yeah, anyway, they are actually pretty good. I might do a little bit of weathering on them. But otherwise they're mostly finished. It also put in a couple of the AWS ramps down there. It's a little dark, but out of the blister pack. That's kind of what they look like. Again, it's not really wanting to focus in. But the AWS ramps, like I said earlier on, they would normally sit out probably a couple of 100 meters, I think, away from the signaling. So they were recommending about 12 to 18 inches. So I'm probably a little bit further away here than we'll probably look for if I'm going to have some kind of signals here. That's more like 24 inches. So it's a little on the long side, but it was because we've got a split here into what will be going off to the tiny yard. That isn't really anywhere close to being there. It's about 5 miles down the line on the prototype of Newcastle. So they probably have AWS ramps around here. Just because the way I'm doing it, I feel like it's over there. Honestly, this probably wouldn't even be here. This is the south line, that's the north line, so I may well take that one up. And what I might end up doing is swinging around and putting them over here. The signaling, I have thought a little bit more about that. So that's why, the AWS ramps I just kind of dropped in there. Just so I can kind of get a look and feel for how they would go. And I'm probably going to lift it and end up putting in a couple more in here for those southbound trends. Maybe talk about some of my ideas on signaling in another video clip. But I'm going to take the trunking and the point motors off now. Go ahead and spray those with primer and then start to do some paint on those, do a little bit of weathering, and then we'll come back, probably show a little bit how I go through and spray, paint and weather, and then we'll put them back in place, and then we can talk a little bit more what I've got idea-wise for the signaling. This is now my very quick and dirty little spray little spray area, just a cardboard box that's turned to the side. Then use a piece of wood, so I've laid out all of the point motors, all of the trunking, all of those AWS ramps. I'm just going to use a basic grey primer that I've used in the past on a bunch of stuff, just because it's cheap and easy, just to give all this a base prime coat, and then I'll go ahead and actually spray these up in separate different colours. These are the point motors all painted up. A little disappointed with how the spray came out. It was a little bit too windy when I was doing the primer, so I ended up capturing a little bit of the dust. The paint itself that I actually then used was just too dark, so I've got a flash on now, so it's lightening it up a little bit, but I thought that they were a little bit too dark in real life, so I painted them a lighter grey and then did a bunch of weathering. I was actually kind of excited. I found a bunch of homebrew weathering powders, and then to paint I used a bunch of different acrylic craft paints. So these are being somewhat weathered with the weathering powders, just to give a little bit of dirt and grime, a little bit of rust effect, and then sprayed with matte varnish. So I'll put these on the layout and see how they now look. I have no idea how much background noise is going to be. It's technically summer, I guess, so the kids are playing out an inflatable paddling pool and stuff. So if you hear a bunch of screaming, the kids aren't dying, they're just playing, having fun, I guess. Anyway, this is the point motors now in place. They do kind of float just a little bit. I did put some additional foam underneath just to give some for the balsa tape. They do float ever so slightly up. That's okay. Actually, again, quite happy with how these have turned out. I'm not super keen on the texturing of them, like I said, because of the way the spray, the primer kind of bubbled and picked up a whole bunch of dust with it being windy, but I don't know, from a distance I don't think that they're all that bad. I guess it's one of those things where you just have to see what it's like once they're going. You know, they would be metal, so they would be smooth. I kind of felt that just playing before they were primed, they were a little bit too smooth. So I don't know, we'll see. But the weathering powders, again, I'm quite happy with how they turned out. So kind of as we pan down, we've now got these point motors in place all the way down. Probably going to now also take the opportunity to do a little bit of weathering on the surface mount ones as well, just so they blend in a little bit. It's not a huge amount I can do. They are still, I didn't think they were too bad before I had anything else in place, but now I started to put in, you know, detailing like this. When you then move over to the surface mount ones, they're really kind of noticeable, but it is what it is. So maybe do a little bit of work on that, see what we can do, and I'm gonna go and start on the trunking for all of the electrical work. This is then the trunking that I done again. Got a little bit odd texture from that primer getting a little dusty when I was spraying, and got a little bit of a wash still drying in here, so it looks a little bit of an overpaint. But this is then just sprayed, and then I got one of the darker grey acrylic paints, watered that down a whole bunch, and then run the brush on the inside. Some of the ones at the back, you know, they're still drying. Might do a little bit of touch-up work on those, but part of the idea is that you got a little bit of grime and dirt that will build up around. I don't know if I'm going to do too much more on these. I don't know if I'm really going to go with the weathering powders much. Here's some that are drying up pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to do any kind of weathering powders on these like I did with the point motors, because these would be set back a little bit further from the track, so they probably wouldn't get as much dirt and grime getting thrown onto them as you would on those point motors that are, you know, obviously right there by where the trends are going through. So I'm going to let these dry up a little bit. I might need to do a little bit of cleanup in some spots, and then we'll lay these down the layout too. This is now the trunking dried up a little bit more and then laid out in place. I might weather this just a little bit because it's right in the middle of the tracks, and then over here I might weather these a little bit because again they're kind of right in the middle of the tracks, so they would probably get a little bit dirty. The other ones, they're all kind of in place, so I'm pretty comfortable with the position of these. I'm probably going to go and glue these down, just use some white glue to glue them down. Kind of intentionally at the moment, not going through the exact process as to how I'm painting and weathering these, just because this is first time that I've done this, and while I currently like how it looks, I'm probably going to need to give this a few days or so, or a week maybe more, do a running session with some videos so we can kind of see how this looks. And if I still like how they are, then I've got all the south side all the north side of the station. I'm doing the south side right now. I'll still have all the north side of the station to do. The exact same detailing pieces. At the start of the video I showed that I had all of these parts already. Yeah, so if these look okay once we kind of got things done, and when we move on and we do that north side of the station, that'll take a little bit more time to break down the actual painting and weathering. Just because there's often times when, certainly I know I'm kind of guilty of this, I'll see videos on YouTube and it's like, oh, it's a really good way of doing it, and so I kind of follow along. And then if it's a channel that I follow for a while, then, you know, 6 months later, 12 months later, they come back and it's like, well, this isn't really how I do it. Or if it's a channel that I'm getting caught up on, you know, when you move forward 6 or 12 months, often there's different techniques that they end up using. You know, so I'm going to give this south side of the station a while, a couple of weeks maybe, before I move on to the north side. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and glue these, and then start to figure out what I'm going to do for what will be the power cables that will then run out to all the different point motors. So I'll glue these down and then we'll come right back. So this is with white glue drying, just holding that trunking down in place, just using some tin food just to wear that down so that it doesn't raise up any. I tried to get it about as straight as I could. Just lay down a metal rule like that along the back and then put the trunking down. Probably wouldn't be perfectly straight in practice anyway, you know, so I'm expecting it to move ever so slightly, and that's just fine by me. Then been looking at what I'm going to do for the actual cabling that will come out of the trunking and out to the point motors. I see a lot of people that use orange cabling. Does add a little bit of color around the layout as well. I don't know if that's also maybe a little bit more of a modern way of doing it, you know, from an OSHA perspective, that OSHA orange, so it's really highly visible so that if you're walking along you don't trip on it or something like that. I'm a little torn, to be honest. A lot of the photos that I've seen, and through the powers of video editing, I'll try and put a photo up on screen now. A lot of the photos that I've seen of Newcastle Central in the 80s and 90s, well, one, it's almost always raining, which is probably fairly accurate, but it also looks just kind of dirty and grimy, which it would have been because there's been a lot of diesels moving around. But basically all of the cabling was black. I can't really find anything that's showing orange cabling. Even some of the more modern videos that I'm seeing of people that are going up and doing train spotting and posting stuff on YouTube, not really seeing a lot of the orange cabling. Maybe I'm just not looking hard enough. So I think what I'm going to do is stick with black. I have a whole bunch of this. This is 24 gauge black cabling. I could easily get orange. I don't have any. I could easily get some, but honestly, I feel like it might look a little bit plain when I put it in now, just because we've already got this kind of dark earth spray over everything, so the black cabling might not pop all that good. But honestly, I kind of feel like once the ballast goes down, it's probably going to be a medium dark gray ballast, you know, then it will pop. And I think honestly the orange, for the look that I'm going for, I think would be a little bit too much. You know, like if you come in here where it's right in between the track work, and this is, you know, fairly prototypical for Newcastle Central, I feel like the orange trunking, the orange cabling coming out of the trunking will probably be a little bit too much. So I'm going to try some of the black wire, this 24 gauge black wire, and use that for the cabling. Probably wait until you know, that white glue sets on the actual trunking part itself. But I'm going to cut some of the wire to length and start to kind of wind it underneath the sleepers and see how it looks once it's in place and everything's dried up. We might just leave it like that. You know, what worst comes to worst, I can always probably pry it out and put orange cabling down. You know, but I think the black will actually look pretty good once ballast's down, and it's a little bit more prototypical. Even though there's a lot of modeler discretion going on here, it'll still look somewhat prototypical for Newcastle Central. So I'm letting the glue dry on the trunking, but moved over to do the AWS ramps. These were really easy. You know, when I spread these with the grip primer, it wasn't too bad, and then went over it with a can of black spray. Touched up with some yellow acrylic paint, and then used the Humbrol weathering powder, dark earth, just to kind of tone it down and add a little bit of dirt to it. Also did some accent colors on the bolts that would go on the plates on either side. they're pretty good. Again, like that, I'm actually kind of liking the weathering powders. From a distance, they look just fine. Once you get in super close, you can tell it's not perfect with that yellow paint, but it's cleaned up enough that from a distance it's kind of okay. Probably shaking because I'm so close in here, but I do like the look of these, so I'm gonna give these a quick coat with the matte varnish and then put them down on the track as well, and they'll add a little bit more scenic detail in and around the station itself too. Alright, so it's a little bit later on in the day, later on the weekend actually. I think I started doing these videos yesterday. But I think, like I said in one of the early videos, it is somewhat summer, kind of, for a few days at least here. So being in and out the train shed, playing with the kids in the pool or kicking the football around, whatever, and then coming to do a little bit. But anyway, this is now with the trunking somewhat drying, still a little bit more drying on that glue to do. It will dry completely clear, you can see at the back, but this is then some of the cabling in place, and quite happy with how that's actually working out. A little bit fiddly, having to cut it all to length and then kind of wind it down in another rail and stuff like that, but I do think that it works out okay. And again, if we take a look at what the actual photos of Newcastle Central would have looked like in the 80s for the point motors, it was just this kind of ragtag almost of the black cabling running out of the point motors. I'm looking at some other photos actually that I had found as well. Let's see if I can get that picture up while I'm talking about it here. Next to each point motor there was also almost a very small relay box. So there would also have been, I can also find photos of like these larger kind of relay boxes like I've got here. I've got one there, and there's another couple at the back there. But then kind of almost alongside each little point motor there would have been a little something too. Haven't really seen anything like that online. Maybe just look around a little bit more, but it's also fairly easy, something that I can make up. Just a little piece of balsa wood or something like that will probably do the trick. I might do that. I don't know. It's kind of a lot of effort, and I think there's already a lot going on here. There's a few layouts that I've been looking at for inspiration in terms of Lineside stuff, and one that I had made a comment on was Tony Northeastern, and that we're trying to cram a lot into a fairly small area when we're doing model train layouts, and so I don't want this to become too busy. I think there's already kind of a lot going on here. I got AWS ramp in as well. I think I have mentioned that I was working on those. So they're not glued in place, but there's kind of one hanging out there. And then I've got some more. Let's go for a little bit of a walk. I don't know what you can see in the sunshine, but I've got some more over on the north side of the station as well. I've been working on a few more. So there's already kind of a lot going on here. We've got AWS ramps, and then point motors, and then cabling, and then trunking, and then relay boxes, and again there's going to be signal gantries over here, and then some more as we come into the station. So I'm a little concerned that if I try to do the very small little relay boxes next to each of these point motors, it might become a little bit too much. So at least for now I think I'm going to leave it so. I'm going to try and do a whole bunch more of this kind of cabling for all of the other point motors. Again, a little tedious, a little bit fiddly. I did also come ahead and do some weathering and painting on these point motors over here, these Peco surface mount point motors. I think it ended up a little bit too brown and weathered. It almost looks like they're actually made out of wood, so I might need to take up some of that weathering, lighten it back more towards the black. We'll see how that looks, but then also a little bit of rust in there too. Again, I think it's just too much. It's a little weird. The plastic material, it didn't take the weathering powders anywhere near as well as the dummy point motors that I was using. So we might need to clean up some of that just a little bit, but at least looks a little bit different almost, even if it's a little bit over the top. Once we get some ballasting in there, we'll get a little bit of a better idea how they'll look. But overall, I think it's looking quite good with that trunking in place and the dummy point motors all down in place, relay boxes glued in. So a little bit more of the cabling, and then we'll come back and see how it's all looking. So this is now all the rest of their cabling done and in place. Really wasn't that bad once I had figured out how to do that first set, and there probably wasn't anywhere near as many point motors either, to be honest. So that is now all of those dummy point motors, all of the trunking, all of the cabling, all of the relay boxes, all done and in place. And again, I'm quite happy with how that looks. I think it will really start to pop when the ballast is down. It's still kind of a little hard to see exactly what this is going to end up being. I think I'm going to call it an end to this video because it's probably getting on a little bit. I do still have the buffer stops to do for inside, those DMU platforms. So there's those 6 platforms at the back there, so 0 and 1 over on the right hand side, and then 9, 10, 11, and 12. I'll probably do those buffer stops in another video. I don't think there's really a whole lot to that. I do like how this works. One thing that I've mentioned a couple of times is I'm looking at putting in like signal gantry here, and there's a couple of relay boxes. There's one there, and there's another one there. They're kind of in place for what would be platform lighting. Again, with the power of the internet, picture that I have found online of Newcastle Central has a little bit of something else, which hopefully is highlighting on the picture. I'm not entirely sure what this is. So the 2-aspect signal is fairly clear. That's very common in and around Newcastle Central of the period, but I'm not entirely sure what this other little part is. I'm hoping that someone smart has decided to watch all the way to the end of this video and has some kind of idea. I'm guessing it's some kind of control or some kind of warning, some kind of signaling for the driver, but I'm not entirely sure what it would be, like if it's an additional caution or something like that. So if anyone's got any ideas of what they are to start out with, that would be great. Bonus points if you know a supplier of them. I'm torn as to whether I'm going to try and scratch build something if I can't find something kind of commercial and off the shelf, because it looks like a lot of effort, and I'm not entirely sure how worthwhile it would be, but they are very common in and around Newcastle Central. So I'm going to do a quick little running session, just a few little shots of trans moving around all this new Lineside equipment, and yeah, I'll try and figure out what will be for the next video. I might move on and just go straight over on the north side of the station, now that I've kind of figured out how to do all of this Lineside equipment. Do a little bit more of a detailed video as to exactly how I go about doing all these little pieces, how I pan up and weather the point motors, things like that. I also want to do backboards, so I don't just have this kind of bare area on the back. And now I also really want to do ballast and don't want to do ballast. I've been avoiding doing ballasting, but I think really this is when this is going to start to pop. I'm a little hesitant to do it without figuring out exactly where signaling is going to be, but I don't think it will be that hard to kind of cut up a little bit of ballasting to put down some signals. So hope you've enjoyed this. Please do subscribe and follow along, so you can kind of see the rest of this scenic work inside the platform area complete. All the south side is now done. Like I say, my little work area over there, the north side, is probably what I'm going to tackle next. So thanks for watching, take care, and we'll be back soon.